Tonight on Reporting Scotland, former Rangers players and staff paid through an offshore trust are told they have weeks to approach the taxman or face an even bigger bill. Scotland's new Chief Constable says mistakes were made when the National Force was created. Warnings that military staff who worked on Sea King helicopters may have been exposed to asbestos. Some residents still can't move back into their homes beside the fire-damaged Glasgow School of Art despite the cordon being lifted.
There is no gas, no electricity, no water. The doors were booted in.
Also coming up on the programme.
You came straight to the UK, all the British dudes lame. Epic.
As Edinburgh's festivals draw to a close, it's another record year for the Fringe. Good evening. Former Rangers players and staff paid through an offshore trust have been told they have weeks to approach the taxman over a settlement or face an even bigger bill. Last year, the Supreme Court upheld a ruling that £47 million paid to Rangers employees between 2001 and 2010 was liable for tax. Now, beneficiaries of the employee benefit trusts are being warned that urgent action is required. Alistair Lamont has this exclusive report.
The scale of Rangers' use of a tax avoidance scheme was laid bare in a BBC Scotland investigation. It outlined how some of the biggest names at the club had been paid through an offshore trust. Sir David Murray himself was the biggest beneficiary, to the tune of £6.3 million. The former Rangers manager and current Scotland boss, Alec McLeish, got £1.7 million. And their former captain, Barry Ferguson, received £2.5 million. But last year, a final court judgment held that over £47 million paid to more than 80 players, managers and staff was taxable. Many were advised these were loans which would never have to be repaid. But this is a copy of a letter that says differently. This was sent earlier this month by Trident Trust, a company based in Jersey. It contains news that was perhaps inevitable, but for some, potentially ruinous. It says HMRC has told them it will seek to recover all income tax found by the Supreme Court to be due, and that where HMRC is unable to recover the tax from the employer, it may transfer the liability for unpaid tax to employees or former employees. While HMRC can still pursue the liquidators of RFC 2012 plc for a portion of what the company owed, more could be salvaged by pursuing the former employees. That could put some on the hook for hundreds of thousands or even millions of pounds. And time could be running out to try to negotiate a deal. The Trust says those in question will have to approach HMRC by 30th of September this year, because, it says, further charges will be applied by HMRC if tax liabilities haven't been settled by 5th of April next year. The letter adds, if you do not come forward voluntarily and seek to settle on preferential terms, HMRC could well pursue you directly and make an assessment on a less favourable basis. Trident Trust stresses it is not offering advice, rather urging the players and staff involved to seek expert advice on how to deal with the situation.
The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has said there is absolutely not a fishing expedition against her predecessor, Alex Salmond. He's accused the Scottish Government of unfair treatment and leaking against him after it emerged that 2 people had made sexual misconduct complaints about him. Mr Salmond denies the allegations. Here's our political correspondent, Glenn Campbell.
Alex Salmond's in dispute with the government he used to head after it concluded an 8-month investigation into 2 complaints about his behaviour from his time as First Minister. On a cabinet visit to the Isle of Arran, his successor, who has reminded SNP members and government staff how to raise concerns about harassment, denied Mr Salmond was being targeted.
Absolutely not. All organisations should make people aware of the procedures they have in place for complaints to come forward, and the SNP have done that previously. We will do that again, and I think that's good practice on the part of all organisations. It's not a fishing expedition on anybody.
At the weekend, this newspaper said it had seen details of one of 2 complaints against Mr Salmond, in which it said a female member of government staff alleges multiple incidences of harassment and conduct of an unwanted sexual nature. allegations Mr Salmond strenuously denies.
I deny that I harassed anyone, and I explicitly refute any suggestion of criminality.
On social media, Mr Salmond complained that confidentiality has not been maintained in this case, but subject to sustained leaking of the most unfair kind, to which the First Minister had this response.
For legal reasons, there is, and I said this yesterday, there is enormous restrictions on what the Scottish Government is able to say just now, and that includes restrictions in our ability to correct what we would consider to be inaccuracies in other public statements. But this matter has been kept entirely confidential within the Scottish Government for 8 months now, and that's the way it should continue.
The Court of Session has yet to hear Mr Salmond's complaint about the Scottish Government's handling of the issue. Separately, the police are considering the allegations against Mr Salmond before deciding whether or not a formal investigation is required. Glenn Campbell, reporting Scotland.
Scotland's new Chief Constable, Ian Livingstone, who's taken up the role officially today, has acknowledged that mistakes were made when the National Force was created 5 years ago. Speaking to recruits, he said consistency and compliance had come before local diversity. Well, our Home Affairs correspondent Rival Alderson is at Dalmarnock for us this evening and can tell us more. Rival.
Yes, Sally, Mr Livingstone was speaking at the Tullyallen Police College to recruits, but his remarks have also been sent to all 22,000 police officers and staff around Scotland, and he said that when the force was created, mistakes were made from the outset. Bear in mind it was a matter of merging 8 forces into a national force, but he said that as they did so, the need to maintain an operational grip on policing meant sometimes Police Scotland had moved too quickly and was seen to impose national policies on local areas. Consistency and compliance, he said, had come before local diversity. Now, this could be seen as an attack on the first Chief Constable, Sir Stephen House, who was very controversial in his issuing of targets for individual officers and crime groups, and particularly in the area of stop and search. But Mr Livingstone said consistency was important across Police Scotland. It meant, for instance, in the areas of homicide and domestic violence, those offences would be dealt with in exactly the same way wherever in the country they had been committed.
And Rival, this evening there's been an announcement on the proposed merger between British Transport Police and Police Scotland.
Yes, Police Scotland have been concerned about this for some time. The Scottish Government has now said that it is going to carry out a further review of the way in which it can achieve devolution of Transport Police, as it puts it. Now, it's fairly plain that this includes options other than a full merger. Now, the police have put a paper to the Scottish Police Authority, which will be looked at on Thursday. They've raised, as I say, concerns about this. Ian Livingstone himself told the Justice Committee that there were real problems with the merger around, among others, the issue of computer systems. It's fairly clear to me that this merger, which the Scottish Government says it is committed to still, has a long time before it'll come to fruition, if it ever does, Sally.
Rival, thank you very much. Military staff who worked on Sea King helicopters are being advised they may have been exposed to asbestos. The warning from the Ministry of Defence comes after the death of an Australian serviceman was attributed to exposure to asbestos or other toxins while working on Sea Kings. Ian McInnes has more.
These helicopters were the workhorse of the industry for almost 50 years, both in search and rescue and in the military, and were used worldwide. From the early 1970s, the sight of Sea Kings patrolling the skies above Scotland was a common one. They were based here at RAF Lossiemouth, at HMS Gannet and at other locations around the country, until they were eventually taken out of service back in 2015. But this latest warning from the MOD will be of major concern to engineering staff who worked on these aircraft. It's the case of Petty Officer Greg Lukes of the Australian Navy, which has raised questions about asbestos on board. Lukes was a fit 35-year-old family man when he was diagnosed with cancer in 2012. Within 2 years, the avionics technician was dead. An official report says his death was in all likelihood caused by exposure to asbestos and toxic chemicals while working on Sea Kings. His widow, Kristen, was unable to be interviewed today, but speaking to me from her home in Australia, she said she wanted others to be aware of the risks and questioned why it's taken so long for the MOD to share this information.
Well, it's quite a concern because a lot of the team were engineers and in the helicopters all over the place. And I think if there's any kind of bad news to come out, people should know about it. Hopefully there won't be, because most of the time MOD was pretty good at safeguarding the people they work with. But if there's any kind of anomalies, people need to know.
The Ministry of Defence is urgently removing parts suspected of containing the harmful material from its aircraft, and they say that the safety of personnel and partners is always their highest priority. The Ministry of Defence say they'll also be contacting civilian groups who have purchased ex-MOD Sea Kings like this one here near Kinloss, as they try to mitigate any risks from possible asbestos on board. Ian McInnes, reporting Scotland, near Kinloss.
More than 10 weeks after the Glasgow School of Art fire, some residents are still not being allowed full access to their homes. The cordon around the site was lifted at the weekend, but many of those displaced are having to stay on in temporary housing because their properties are still not safe to live in. It comes as businesses begin the major task of trying to get back to normal. Lucy White reports.
There's a live mug of, I don't know, that'll be tea and something else.
The contents of a kitchen abandoned in a hurry. This kind of clean-up is the least of the worries for residents finally getting back into their homes 10 weeks after the Glasgow School of Art fire effectively put the area where they live in lockdown.
It's been beyond frustrating not being able to get into my home, because it's also not at my place of work, but it's where my working tools are. I'm a photographer and all my camera gear is here, so I just haven't been able to work. It's very unsettling not being in your own home.
Chris is one of the lucky ones. Some residents on the city's Dalhousie Street still can't stay at home.
There is no gas, no electricity, no water. The doors were booted in, so they have to have new doors. So everything's got to be arranged so as we can actually move in. And the houses are not very, well, they're not smelling very fresh, put it that way.
These homes here are controlled by the Charing Cross Housing Association, and it says it's doing everything it can to get people back in here swiftly and safely. Now, as you can see behind me, work still continues to make sure the Glasgow School of Art is completely safe. But there's still no word on what caused that devastating fire, which has had such an effect on so many people's lives.
Your entire life becomes on hold, because this is what our whole lives revolve around. This is our work, this is our property, it's where our children know us home as well. So to not have it has been really difficult, and the pressure's been hard.
Some business owners and residents are now working with lawyers to look at whether keeping the cordon in place for so long was legal. Glasgow City Council said its priority was getting everyone back in safely. Lucy White, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
Edinburgh's festivals draw to a close tonight with the traditional fireworks concert. It's been another exceptional year for the Fringe. It's issued more than 2,800,000 tickets, a record and 5% up on last year. Our arts correspondent Pauline McLean reflects on the many different reasons people come to the Edinburgh for the festival.
Came straight to the UK, all the British dudes lame, epic.
This time last year, 6 was just another student show. But this time round, this musical about the wives of Henry VIII, reimagined as pop stars, is a sellout and on its way to even bigger things.
We're going straight to the West End after this, and then we're going to various other UK locations, sort of culminating in a big festive season of 2 weeks in Glasgow.
For others, just being here is enough. A number of writers failed to secure visas to attend the Edinburgh International Book Festival, but were determined to get here, albeit later than planned.
أمر كتير مؤثر بالنسبة لي.
It's very heartwarming to be able to be here and see the people face to face and relay personal experience and talk about experience as a Palestinian too.
For most, though, being at the festival is just about fun, and it's the ultimate level playing field, whether you're making your debut like Sophie or returning to where you made your debut more than 30 years ago, like her stepfather, Jack.
We were told before we came up that if you're late getting off the stage, the next show will trample on top of you and the next audience will trample on top of you, so you have to be quick and organised about it.
In Scots God on television, I just stand there and people kind of dress me, people doing up my belt, and I'm backstage just with all the jumble of stuff and going, where are the people where are my people to do my belt up? And where's all this? And suddenly it's just me. So you just lug all your props and you lug all them off. But that's what's great about it. It reminds you, just takes you right back to when you started out.
For others, it's a chance to strike a new chord with audiences. Some of Scotland's best known authors stepping from the page to the stage as the fun-loving crime writers. In Edinburgh, at festival time, anything is possible.
Well, it all began 3.5 weeks ago on the other side of the castle at the Usher Hall, and it all comes to a close tonight here in Princes Street Gardens for the fireworks finale concert. And in between, we've welcomed the world to Edinburgh across all the festivals. They've all had a successful year. The final ticket sales at the International Festival have come in at £3.8 million, which is up again. And at the Book Festival, footfall and book sales are also up. Now, the challenge for the festivals in coming years will be to balance that success and those huge numbers with the day-to-day experience of a city at capacity. That's for tomorrow, and for next year. Tonight, it's all about a chance for the festivals to say thank you and good night until next year.
And thank you, Pauline. You're watching BBC Reporting Scotland. It's 7 o'clock. A reminder of tonight's top story. Former Rangers players and staff paid through an offshore trust are told they have weeks to approach the taxman or face an even bigger bill. And still to come, calls for £70 million to boost the country's canal network. Mining disasters are a thing of the past in Scotland. The country's last deep mine at Long Annet in Fife closed back in 2002. But the rescue techniques developed over many decades are now put to use in other industries, including the offshore and renewable energy sectors. The organisation which used to answer the call when disaster struck at the pit is now training a new generation of emergency response teams, as Andrew Anderson has been finding out.
Come on the fresh air base.
A smoke-filled mine. A rescue team trying to find an injured man. As the smoke clears, they see him.
The base to Liam. Go ahead, Liam. We've located the casualty at point D. He's unconscious.
On the surface, it's the news they were hoping for. This is a training exercise at a facility in Fife.
Prepare to lift and lift.
Once one of several centres operated by the Mine Rescue Service, covering the Scottish coalfields. Some of this team joined up when they were miners.
During the miners' strike, I was involved in fires at Salisbury, Francis and Seafield. Both Francis and Seafield were under the sea, so that was a completely new concept for me, because obviously the coal mine I was in was on dry land.
Knockshinnock Castle Colliery near Cumnock, Ayrshire.
A reminder of how dangerous the mines were and how skilled the rescuers. All but 13 miners were taken to safety from this Ayrshire pit. Mine rescues are pretty rare these days in this country, but as the way we get energy changes, so do the risks, and so does the training to deal with those risks. These men are now more likely to be found working high above the ground rather than under it. Here they're practicing the rescue of a worker who's taken ill on a mast. These days, team members are mainly recruited from the armed forces and the emergency services.
There's certain correlations between the emergency services and here at Mine Rescue. There's a lot of first aid work and dealing with external agencies whilst we're at jobs both in the emergency services and here.
In 2004, MRS faced one of its biggest challenges. An explosion destroyed the Stockline factory in Glasgow. 9 people died. The building had to be made as safe as possible for the emergency services. Mine rescue skills were needed.
It was about supporting what was left of the building, and initially that's what we concentrated on. We secured what was there, and I very much thought we would do in a mine. After we'd done that, we implemented a system which we call tunneling and shoring, which is tunneling into the rubble to find casualties, and we recovered a few people. It was a successful exercise on our behalf.
Safety, whether it's under the ground or above it, is the cornerstone of what this team does, making every workplace as safe as it can be. Andrew Anderson, reporting Scotland, Crossgates in Fife.
The remains have been found in Sutherland of the oldest known golden eagle in the world. It was discovered near Inchna-Dampf, and it's thought the bird had died in a territorial battle with a rival. A ring was attached to the eagle's leg in 1985, making it at least 33 years old. When 2 containers filled with pineapples and bananas were lost overboard from a cargo ship in the Atlantic last year, experts said they believed the fruit was likely to end up on beaches in Shetland and the Western Isles. And 10 months later, that's exactly what's happened. Shetland Islanders have started sharing photos of their unusual beachcombing finds in the form of rather sad-looking and unappetising pineapples. The Forth and Clyde Canal has an important role in Scotland's industrial past. For well over a century, it provided a route for seagoing vessels between the firths of Forth and Clyde. But what of its future? The closure of 2 bridges has caused major disruption, and campaigners say not enough's being spent on maintenance of the wider network. Scottish Canals say £70 million is needed to get all the country's canals back in shape. Gillian Sharp reports.
140 miles of waterway, more than 250 bridges, the canal network, loved by many who use it for leisure, tourism and travel.
It's peace, quiet, and all you can hear is the water lapping against the front of the boat and the birds singing. What more can you ask?
But this 250-year-old asset is showing its age. The closure of 2 newer bridges has meant disruption on the Forth and Clyde. And while there is now Scottish Government money to repair them, it's been a difficult summer.
It's bad all round because the hire boats, which are based at the Falkirk Wheel, are in a situation where they cannot come west. The canal is losing out on it as well because less traffic means that there's more weed grows. So the boats are necessary to the canal. It's the purpose the canal was made for.
The crowning achievement of the Millennium Link project, the opening of the Falkirk Wheel in 2002, all part of securing a brighter future for the network. And there are wider issues. A recent Scottish Canals document says future waterway use may not necessarily include navigation, although it is an important consideration. It judges securing navigation on the Forth and Clyde as being of lesser priority to elsewhere.
We are challenged, and there's no doubt about it. From an engineering perspective, we've run the figures, we've looked at it, and we have got a backlog of circa about £70 million that needs of investment that's required to bring these canals to standard and to secure long-term navigation on them.
Volunteers cutting back lush summer growth by the Union Canal. Some who've been involved for decades are anxious that the network doesn't fall into disrepair.
It's a bigger picture that I'm worried about, and that is that are Scottish Canals getting enough money to actually maintain and look after the canals? It's not just for boaters, remember, the canals are used by everybody.
Plenty to reflect on and no real certainty about the waters ahead. Gillian Sharp, reporting Scotland.
Hearts FC have confirmed that the club's manager Craig Levein is recovering in hospital after being admitted this morning. In a statement, it asked for Craig and his family's privacy to be respected and wished him a speedy recovery. His assistant Austin McPhee will take over first-team duties until Levein returns. And staying with football, Scotland manager Alex McLeish has named his squad for the upcoming matches against Belgium and Albania. The Scots face Belgium in a friendly on Friday before taking on Albania in the Nations League on the 10th of September, with both matches taking place at Hampden. Hearts defender John Souttar has been called up and could earn his first international cap. Christophe Berra and Aberdeen's Scott McKenna are absent through injury, but Celtic's Jack Henry is included in the squad.
We've assessed a few of the young players over these last few months. I've seen quite a bit of Hearts, and they started the season very confidently. He's now got the captain's armband, and his form has been pretty assured. And I seen him last week at Dunfermline, and he looked very composed, and I thought it was time to give him a crack.
Andy Murray's in action at the US Open in New York in his first appearance in a Grand Slam tournament for 14 months. Murray's up against Australia's James Duckworth in the first round at Flushing Meadows. The Scot saved 2 break points early in the match and at points showed flashes of his best tennis. But the first set was decided by a tie-break and it was Duckworth who prevailed 7-5. Murray's broken serve early in the second set and leads by 2 games to 1. Now, to a tale with a happy ending. When the owners of a Shar-Pei dog found a lump on her side, they feared she had cancer. They were surprised to be told by vets that Hoshi had swallowed an 8-inch skewer along with a chicken kebab. Vets on the south side of Glasgow say the operation to remove it was complex but successful. Hoshi had stolen the meaty treat at a barbecue she'd attended with her owners, who are vegetarians. Now over to Christopher for the weather.
Sally, thank you. Hello there, good evening to you. Well, fairly cloudy conditions for some today, the odd spot of light rain or drizzle, but elsewhere the cloud did thin and break and there were some lovely spells of sunshine. Lovely photos there from our weather watchers. Now, for the week ahead, well, fairly changeable. The first couple of days influenced by low pressure up towards the north, but then high pressure tends to build in from the south, settling things down, and there'll be a lot of dry weather on offer, some sunshine at times too. Now, back to the here and now, and some late spells of evening sunshine, then largely dry overnight, a mixture of cloud and clear skies. Temperatures around about 9 to 12 Celsius in towns and cities, but perhaps a few cooler spots across parts of the rural northeast. You'll notice, though, cloud and rain behind me there. That's a weather front moving in off the Atlantic for tomorrow, but it doesn't make too much progress inland. It will mean a fairly cloudy and increasingly wet and windy day across the northwest, but elsewhere, it's a dry and fine day with some spells of sunshine and feeling quite pleasant in that sun at times too. By mid-afternoon, the winds will be strengthening through the Minch, perhaps strong at times, but elsewhere a light to moderate southwesterly away from the southwest coast. In the sunshine, 17 to 19 Celsius quite easily, and a few spots 20 degrees or more, certainly over towards parts of Tayside up towards the Moray Firth. But to the north and west of the Great Glen, cloudy with this narrow band of rain moving in. It should brighten up by this point for the Western Isles after a fairly soggy morning. Clouding over for Orkney and Shetland, a few showers, quite breezy at times too. Then the rest of the afternoon into the evening, that rain band continues to work its way south and eastwards, reaching all parts overnight. And then it's Wednesday, midweek, that rain clears away and that high pressure starts to take over, building in from the south, keeping things largely settled, largely dry. A westerly wind, though, and that's going to drive in a few showers, mainly for western parts of the country. The further east that you are on Wednesday, the drier and brighter it will be. Cooler compared with tomorrow, afternoon highs around 15 to 17 Celsius. And then for the end of the week, this is Thursday and Friday, well, there'll be some bright or sunny spells around, occasional showers, and it will be quite chilly overnight as well. So here's a quick look at Thursday. Mostly dry, occasional showers, some sunshine, and temperatures by mid-afternoon creeping up to around 17 degrees. That's the forecast for now.
Christopher, thank you. And that's all for now. I'll be back with the late bulletin at 10:25. But until then, from all of the team here and around the country, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.